At first glance, the 1966 Volvo 122S didn't look like the kind of car that would earn legendary status. Park it next to a Ford Mustang or a Jaguar E-Type, and it seemed almost invisible. Where American cars of the 1960s flaunted bold fins, wide chrome grilles, and raw horsepower, and Italian sports cars seduced with curves and flair, the Amazon appeared almost plain. Its design leaned heavily on Scandinavian restraint, upright, functional, and modest. Yet, look closely, and you'll spot faint echoes of American influence: rounded fenders, a proud grille, and just enough chrome trim to avoid looking stark. This balance made the Amazon a curious sight in its time. It wasn't brash. It wasn't flamboyant. Instead, it radiated a quiet confidence, as if it had nothing to prove. For many buyers, that was exactly the appeal. While the rest of the world chased style and speed, Volvo offered something different, a car that didn't shout for attention, but instead promised to be there, faithfully, for as long as you needed it. But that modest exterior was misleading. Beneath its conservative skin lay an engineering philosophy that would make the Amazon one of the most unkillable cars of the entire decade. If the Amazon's exterior whispered modesty, its engine was where the legend began to shout. The heart of the 122S was the B18, a 1.8-liter inline-4 that, on paper, didn't look like anything special. With about 100 horsepower in its twin carburetor form, it was far from a fire-breathing performance motor. In fact, next to the V8 monsters coming out of Detroit, the B18 seemed almost laughably ordinary. But here's where Volvo played a different game. Instead of chasing speed, they built the engine to last. Every component of the B18 was over-engineered: thick cylinder walls that could handle abuse, a crankshaft designed to take punishment far beyond its rated output, and a bottom end so robust that mechanics joked Volvo must have stolen blueprints from farm tractors. It wasn't fast, but it was practically immortal. Stories spread quickly among mechanics and owners. There were tales of Amazons running completely dry of oil yet somehow refusing to die, coughing and clattering along for days until finally given mercy with a repair. Others clocked hundreds of thousands of miles without ever needing a rebuild. The B18 didn't just power the car, it created a reputation. By the late 1960s, Volvo introduced the B20, a 2.0-liter evolution of the same design. It brought a little more torque and horsepower, but more importantly, it carried forward the same indestructible DNA. These engines didn't just run, they endured. They were the reason the Amazon became known as the car you couldn't kill. But an engine alone doesn't make a legend. The real test came when these cars faced the unforgiving climates and rough roads of the real world, and the Amazon proved it was more than just tough under the hood. A tough engine is one thing, but a car proves its worth when thrown into the real world, and the Volvo Amazon faced some of the harshest conditions imaginable. In Sweden and across Scandinavia, winters were brutal. Temperatures plunged far below freezing, roads disappeared under ice and snow, and salted surfaces ate away at lesser machines like acid. For most cars, this environment was a death sentence. But for the Amazon, it was home. Families trusted it to start on mornings so cold that even stepping outside felt impossible. Farmers used it to haul tools, equipment, and sometimes even livestock down roads that were little more than muddy tracks. Students and commuters relied on it to cover long distances through storms that left other vehicles stranded. The Amazon wasn't glamorous, but it was dependable, and that's what made people love it. When the car crossed the Atlantic to America, it found a very different kind of following. While Detroit Iron was all about excess, chrome, fins, and roaring V8s, the Volvo Amazon appealed to a quieter crowd. Professors, intellectuals, and freethinkers saw in it a machine that matched their values: simple, honest, and enduring. In an era when most cars demanded constant maintenance, the Amazon seemed almost stubborn in its reliability, and that simplicity was its secret weapon. There were no fragile gimmicks, no overcomplicated luxuries, no half-baked engineering experiments. Every switch, bolt, and panel was designed with one idea in mind: it had to last. Owners discovered that the Amazon didn't just survive in tough environments, it thrived. But surviving the frozen backroads of Scandinavia was only part of the story. The Amazon soon proved it wasn't just reliable, it could perform under pressure, even when critics doubted it had the speed or agility to compete. When journalists first got behind the wheel of the Volvo Amazon, they didn't quite know what to make of it. Here was a car that looked modest, offered only about 100 horsepower, and carried none of the excitement of the muscle cars or sleek sports coupes of the day. Yet the moment they drove it, the tone changed. Road and Track famously described the Amazon as a car that felt like it had been carved out of a single block of steel. That wasn't just poetic language, it was the genuine impression the car left on anyone who drove it. Its unibody construction gave it a solidity most cars of the 1960s lacked, and its suspension, while conservative, delivered stability and predictability. On highways where small European cars often felt nervous or twitchy, the Amazon held its line with calm authority. Even the engine, while no powerhouse, had its charms. Reviewers noted the surprising satisfaction of wringing out the little four-cylinder on winding roads. It didn't roar or surge with brute force, it sang in its own steady, reliable rhythm. Drivers came away impressed not by how fast it was, but by how unshakably competent it felt. This was a car that didn't ask to be treated gently. It invited you to push it, to lean on it, to trust that no matter what, it would deliver. For journalists used to testing fragile sports cars that broke down under stress, the Amazon was a revelation. And if the press was impressed by its composure on the road, what came next would leave them stunned. Because this quiet, unassuming family sedan wasn't just reliable, it was about to become a genuine competitor in some of the toughest motorsport events on Earth. No one expected the Volvo Amazon to become a racing hero. On paper, it was a family sedan, safe, solid, and dependable, but hardly a car you'd take into battle against Europe's fastest machines. Yet, when rally teams stripped them down, tuned the engines, and pointed them toward the toughest endurance races of the 1960s, the Amazon revealed a hidden side. It wasn't just tough, it could fight. The Amazon lined up for legendary events like the Monte Carlo Rally and the East African Safari Rally, competitions so brutal they chewed up cars twice as powerful and spat them out in pieces. Where others broke, the Volvo endured. It wasn't the fastest on the straights, but its balance, rugged suspension, and unshakable reliability kept it in the game when rivals fell apart. Time and again, the Amazon finished high in the rankings, shocking crowds and rivals alike. Watching a humble Volvo sedan outlast exotic sports cars and factory-backed giants was a story that spread fast. Suddenly, the boring Swedish car had proven itself on the global stage. These victories cemented its reputation. The Amazon wasn't just reliable, it was unbreakable, even when pushed to its limits. Owners who already loved the car for daily life now had even more reason to trust it. If it could survive African deserts and alpine snowstorms, it could certainly handle the morning commute or a family road trip. But rally trophies weren't the only way the Amazon was rewriting the rulebook. At a time when most manufacturers ignored safety, Volvo was quietly turning this car into a pioneer that would change the industry forever. Long before safety became a buzzword in the car industry, Volvo was already making it a priority, and the Amazon was one of the first cars to prove it. In 1959, Volvo engineer Nils Bohlin introduced the three-point seatbelt, a design so effective it's still used in every modern car today. And by the mid-1960s, the Amazon became one of the very first vehicles in the world to offer these belts as standard equipment in the front seats. At the time, this was revolutionary. Many carmakers considered seatbelts unnecessary, even bothersome, and some buyers resisted them altogether. But Volvo pushed ahead, convinced that protecting lives was more important than chasing style trends. That bold move didn't just set Volvo apart, it changed the entire industry. Amazon owners soon discovered what that focus on safety meant in the real world. There were countless stories of accidents where the car crumpled, but its occupants walked away largely unharmed. In an era when many cars were little more than rolling death traps, the Amazon quietly offered peace of mind. Volvo's advertising began to lean into this identity, highlighting durability and safety instead of glamour. For families, professors, and everyday drivers, this message hit home. The Amazon wasn't just transportation, it was protection. But perhaps its most enduring legacy wasn't written in lab tests or advertising copy. It was written by the people who drove them day after day, often for decades, discovering just how long these cars could last. If there's one thing that truly defines the Volvo Amazon, it's not speed, not beauty, and not luxury, it's survival. Owners didn't just drive these cars, they built entire lives around them. And the stories that emerged over the decades sound less like tales of automobiles and more like legends of endurance. There are countless reports of Amazons passing 500,000 miles on their original engines, still running as faithfully as the day they left the factory. Mechanics told stories of cars that had been run dry of oil or overheated to the point where most engines would seize forever. Yet the Amazon simply coughed, sputtered, and kept moving. It became a running joke in Scandinavia that the Amazon would give up its paint to rust before it ever gave up its mechanical heart. Some Amazons lived even wilder second lives. Parked in barns or garages for decades, they were pulled out years later, given fresh fuel and a new battery, and started almost instantly, as if they'd only been asleep, waiting patiently for their next journey. In one famous anecdote, a Swedish mechanic quipped, "The Amazon doesn't die, it just takes naps." Owners bonded with these cars in a way few people bond with machines. They weren't flashy status symbols, they were companions. Families trusted them through blizzards, across long road trips, and even through accidents that might have ended differently in other cars. To many, the Amazon wasn't just a car, it was part of the family, and losing one felt like saying goodbye to an old friend. But this wasn't just nostalgia. These stories of impossible endurance gave the Amazon a reputation that outlived its production years. By the late 1960s, it was already being hailed as one of the toughest cars ever built, and its influence would shape Volvo's identity for generations to come. By the time production ended in 1970, the Volvo Amazon had already secured its place in history. It wasn't remembered for breathtaking speed or glamorous styling. It was remembered for something far rarer: trust. At a time when most cars aged quickly and were discarded within a decade, the Amazon proved that a well-built machine could outlast not only its owners, but entire generations. The Amazon became the bridge between Volvo's early post-war image as a small Scandinavian automaker and its later identity as a global brand. It showed the world what Volvo stood for: safety, durability, and engineering honesty. The 3-point seatbelt, the unkillable B18 and B20 engines, and the countless stories of Amazon's surviving conditions that would destroy ordinary cars. These elements laid the foundation for the reputation Volvo still carries today. Even now, decades later, the Amazon is more than just a classic car. To enthusiasts, it represents a different philosophy of automotive design, one that valued endurance over excess. While muscle cars are remembered for horsepower and speed, the Amazon is remembered for loyalty and resilience. It's the car that kept going when others gave up, the car that quietly became a legend not by dominating racetracks or headlines, but by being there, day after day, year after year. In today's world of high-tech features and fragile electronics, the Amazon feels almost like a relic from another era. Yet its legacy endures, reminding us that greatness in a car isn't always about excitement. It can also be about the quiet, unshakable promise that no matter what happens, your car will never let you down. The Volvo Amazon was never the loudest, the fastest, or the flashiest car of its era. It didn't dominate drag strips or grace the covers of fashion magazines. Instead, it built its legend in silence, mile after mile, year after year, proving that true greatness comes not from temporary glory, but from endurance. This was the car that carried families through blizzards, survived accidents that should have ended in tragedy, and clocked distances so vast they seemed impossible. It was the car that could sit forgotten in a barn for decades, then awaken with the turn of the key. A car so overbuilt, so stubbornly reliable, that mechanics joked it would rust away long before it ever wore out. In the 1960s, when most manufacturers sold dreams of speed and style, Volvo sold something far more valuable: trust. And with the Amazon, that trust became unshakable. It didn't just change how people thought of Volvo, it changed how people thought of what a car could be. Today, the Amazon's legacy still resonates. It reminds us that a car doesn't have to be powerful or glamorous to become a legend. Sometimes, all it takes is honesty in engineering, a focus on safety, and a determination to never quit. So while other classics are remembered for their horsepower numbers or their quarter-mile times, the Volvo Amazon is remembered for something far rarer, being the car that refused to die. And in doing so, it earned a place among the most beloved machines ever built.